Welcome, everybody. Inshallah, you're all doing well and you're in good health. Our young attendee is eager to start. So I'll remind you to have a sincere intention in your heart by attending this lesson. Lillahi ta'ala. Brothers and sisters in Islam, the level of patience of people differs. Also, when faced with calamities or different kinds of hardships. And during fasting, we notice that some people, when they are hungry and you talk to them, they tell you, I'm hungry, don't talk to me. Or they say, I'm fasting, don't speak to me right now. But actually, we need to remember that just because the person is fasting, it doesn't mean he becomes unapproachable or he changes character. Actually, Ramadan is an opportunity for us to work on our habits and to work on our traits. And if we notice in ourselves that we lack patience, so we can work on that as well. Some people, subhanAllah, during the day when they're fasting, they become easily agitated. And so they speak maybe harshly with their family members, being their spouse or their parents or their children. And the spouse might reciprocate that way of talking. And the children, whether they are young or teenagers, they learn from the behavior of their parents. They see and they might imitate. They might imitate that later on. So they might then later on speak the same way with their spouse when they're adults, or speak then to their parents in such a manner and claim that they are excused because they are fasting. So let us remember and not use that as an excuse. If we are hungry, not let that affect our way of speech or our manners. We can practice by training ourselves to have more patience, work on our manners, and remember that the best creation of Allah, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had the best manners, and we can learn from his manners and how he was during the month of Ramadan. And keep in mind that the companions, they used to go through lots of things also during the month of Ramadan, and they went actually through battles when they were fasting in the month of Ramadan. So let us remember that and practice having more patience in our way of talking, in our manners as well, when dealing with people at work, at school, at the university, and also with members of our own family at home. Inshallah, we will continue. We stopped yesterday. We were talking about the attribute of Allah, the attribute of kalam, which is referred to as speech in English. And we said that the speech of Allah, like all of his attributes, it has no beginning and no end, and it does not change. And it is not composed of letters because it's not a language. It is not interrupted. It is not a sound. Okay, so it is not composed of words. It is not like our speech whatsoever. So when you know that and you believe in this firmly, if a person then asks you, but don't we say about the Quran, the speech of Allah? The answer is yes, we do refer to the Quran as Kalamullah because the Quran, the expressions, they are expressions of the eternal speech of Allah. And these expressions are not made, a person did not come up with them. Rather, they were revealed by Allah Ta'ala to His Messenger Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. So we refer to the Quran as Kalamullah because this was revealed by Allah. It is not something that a human being came up with, and it is an expression of the eternal speech of Allah, which is not with letters and not with words. I will give you examples to clarify further, inshallah. So we said, as to the eternal speech of Allah, which is His attribute, it has no beginning and no end, and it's not with a language. However, when we are reading the surah, the chapters in the Quran, they themselves, what we are reading, they are not themselves the eternal speech of Allah. No, because what we are reading, we're reading words, and these words are in a language. They are in the Arabic language. And languages, yes, are created. And these words have a beginning and they make a sound. When I start by saying the word bismi, I start with saying the word ba, and then I finish, and then I start with the letter sin, bismi. So I'm starting a letter and I'm finishing that letter and I'm starting another letter. So these letters are created. They have a beginning and an end. They are in a language, in the Arabic language. These words that we are reading when we are reciting Quran, they are not themselves the eternal speech of Allah. No, rather they are expressions of the eternal speech of Allah, which is not in a language, not with a letter, not with sound. For instance, if somebody writes on a board the word Allah, and somebody asks him, "What is this?" And he says, "Allah." It does not mean that what is written on the board is the being of Allah whom we worship. No, not at all. But what is written on the board is an expression of the being whom we worship, who is not like His creation at all. Another example, if you write on a piece of paper the word fire, and somebody asks you, "What is this?" and you say fire, it does not mean that there is actual fire on the paper. No, rather, what you wrote is an expression of the fire which burns. Okay, so then what we are reading in the Quran, the verses in the surahs, in the chapters, these verses are composed of words which are in a language and have a beginning and an end. And they are expressions of the eternal speech of Allah, which is not in a language, not with words, and it has no beginning and no end. So do not imagine it, because we cannot imagine. What we imagine is something that is created. Everything that we imagine is something that is created. But Allah Ta'ala is not created, and His attributes are not created. Okay, so then we believe that Allah, the Creator, is not like His creation at all, and His attributes are not like the attributes of the creation. So as we said yesterday, Allah Ta'ala is clear of all the non-befitting attributes. And I told you that all what is created does not befit to be attributed to the Creator. So the scholars said that Allah Ta'ala is attributed with many attributes. And among these attributes, there are 13 attributes which the accountable person is obligated to know. You already know now who the accountable person is. They said these 13 attributes were mentioned repeatedly in the Quran, either explicitly or implicitly. And the Prophet ﷺ used to teach them to his companions. So the scholars said knowing them is a personal obligation upon the accountable person. It does not mean that you have to know them in a particular order. No, but you should believe in the meaning of these attributes. And we will go over them now, inshallah. So among these attributes is existence. Allah Ta'ala exists, and His existence has no beginning and no end. And Allah Ta'ala existed eternally before creating all places and directions. He existed without a place and without a direction. And you know that Allah does not change. So after creating places and directions, Allah Ta'ala still exists without a place and without a direction. And Allah Ta'ala is attributed with oneness. Oneness here means that God does not have partners to Him in Godhood. So it does not mean number one, because number one can be added to, and then you will have two. Number one can be divided. So when we say Allah Ta'ala is attributed with oneness, it does not mean number one. Rather, it means that Allah does not have partners to Him in Godhood. As we say in Arabic, ليس له شريك في الألوهية. He does not have partners to Him in Godhood. So Muslims worship Allah only, and they do not associate partners with Allah. And Allah Ta'ala is attributed with eternity. This means He has no beginning to His existence. And He is attributed with everlastingness. So the existence of Allah does not end. He is eternal and everlasting. Also among the attributes of Allah is non-needness of others. Allah created us and He does not need us. He created the creation and He is not in need of the creation. So, brothers and sisters, when we perform acts of obedience properly with a sincere intention, this is good for us. We benefit by that. But Allah Ta'ala does not benefit by that. And when we commit sins, this is not good for us. But this does not harm Allah. Allah Ta'ala does not need any of His creation. Allah Ta'ala is attributed with power. And we said that the power of Allah is not like our power. Our power is with physical strength, where all this is created. Allah Ta'ala is attributed with power, which is not like our power, and Allah Ta'ala has power over all things. Allah is attributed with will, and we said that the will of Allah has no beginning and no end, and whatever Allah eternally will to be, it will be, and whatever Allah did not will to be, it will not be. And always remember, there is wisdom in what Allah Ta'ala decreed. Okay? Always remember that. There is wisdom in what Allah Ta'ala decreed, in what Allah Ta'ala willed. Some people now, they see the great or severe harm that is being inflicted on so many Muslims worldwide. And some people say, but these are Muslims. Why is this happening to them? There is wisdom behind that. Whoever is inflicting that harm upon the Muslims, they are doing what is not good to do. But we do not object to Allah willing for that to happen. Allah willed for both good and bad to happen. We do not object to Allah willing the bad to happen. And we believe that there is wisdom behind that. And the Muslim, when the Muslim, he or she, is patient with these hardships, inshallah, he will be rewarded. His rank, inshallah, will be a higher level. It will be raised. So, but the person should be patient when he is inflicted with calamities. And it was said that this life is not paradise for the believer. There are various types of difficulties that might befall the Muslim in this life, be it in his health, be it that he becomes poor and he does not have money anymore, he loses his wealth, or that he loses his family members, like we are seeing with many now in Palestine, that they are losing many of their family members, people who are very dear to them, like their children. Yet we are see that many of them, Alhamdulillah, they are not objecting to Allah. They are saying, praise be to Allah. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah. And this is good that they are patient and they are thanking Allah and they are not objecting to Allah. For if they object to Allah, this does not benefit them. It does not bring their children back to them. No. But if they object to Allah, they lose. Not just have they lost their children, but they lose also because they become a non-believer. Whoever objects to Allah becomes a non-believer. And if he dies like that, he dies as a kafir. So the person then should remember to be patient all the time when inflicted with hardships. And when we are feeling pain because we are sick, or maybe we become really hungry during the day, remember to be patient, not to object to Allah, not to commit sins because of the hardship that we are going through, not to cuss the religion of Islam, not to cuss the month of Ramadan or any prophet, or not to cuss another Muslim just because we are angry, not to cuss a Muslim unjustly. So we remember to be patient and remember that there is wisdom in what Allah Ta'ala willed to happen, whether we know the wisdom behind that or not, but we believe for sure there is wisdom. So whatever Allah Ta'ala will to be, it will be. And nobody can change this. Even if, thousands of people came together to protect you from something that Allah willed for you, for this thing to occur to you, they will not be able to defend you from that. Whatever Allah willed to occur to you, it will. And if Allah did not will for harm to come upon you, it will not. Even if thousands of enemies will to harm you, they will not be able. So always remember that and rely on Allah. Do not resort to committing sins. Also, among the attributes of Allah Ta'ala is knowledge. Allah knows about everything. He knows about things before they happen. And I'm repeating this because I want you always to remember that and teach that to others. Unfortunately, there are people who have a belief that is blasphemy, that is kufr. They think that Allah does not know of things until after they happen. No, this is kufr, blasphemy. Allah Ta'ala, He is the one who willed for things to happen. So for sure He knows about them. And He knows about them before they happen. Okay? So the knowledge of Allah does not change. It does not increase nor decrease. And as we mentioned yesterday, Allah Ta'ala is attributed with hearing and sight. And His hearing and His sight is not like ours. So it is not with an instrument, it is not with an ear or any other body part. Allah Ta'ala is not attributed with having a body. So He does not have a face, He does not have a head, He does not have hands. Okay? And this is also among the fundamentals of the belief. And I would like you here to be really active in warning people against those books that they claim to be interpretations of the Quran, but in reality, they are writing in them what goes against the teachings of the Quran. And why is that? That is because they have translated everything in the Quran verbally, word for word. And the Quran is not to be translated literally, all of it like that. The Quran contains two types of verses. Verses whose apparent meaning is very clear, and we take that, and verses where we are not to take the apparent meaning. Rather, we believe that the verse has a meaning that is befitting to Allah, and if the scholars they gave an interpretation that befits to be attributed to Allah, then we take that interpretation. But we do not translate all verses in the Quran literally word for word. And I just told you, Allah Ta'ala is not attributed with having a hand. But what we are seeing, unfortunately, in these that they claim to be interpretations or translations of the Quran, they have written in them that Allah has a hand. They have attributed physical body parts to Allah. They have attributed to Allah being in the sky. And this goes against the belief of Muslims, as we said, because Allah is not like His creation. And subhanAllah, nowadays we are hearing of many people who are converting to Islam. So this makes our heart feel delighted. We're happy. But on the other hand, we hear that some of these people, they take a copy of these that they say translations and they are reading on their own. They might be reading things that go against the belief. And what if they believe this? If they believe what goes against the fundamentals of the Islamic belief, then they're not Muslims. Subhanallah. So I urge you to teach what you are learning, the meaning of the Shahada, and to further share these beneficial lessons. These lessons contain great valuable information. So share them to many people as you can, so that inshallah they will reach these people who sincerely want to learn about Islam and converted or want to convert, so that they learn really the meaning of the two testifications of faith. So Allah Ta'ala is attributed with hearing and sight, and His hearing and sight are without instrument, without any body part. And Allah Ta'ala is attributed with life. The life of Allah is not like ours. It is not composed of flesh or body or soul. No, for all of these are created. The life of Allah has no beginning and no end. And Allah Ta'ala is attributed with speech, which we already talked about today. The speech of Allah is not in a language, not with letters, not with sounds, okay? It has no beginning and no end. And among the attributes of Allah is non-resemblance to the creation. And I told you yesterday the verse in the Quran that gives this meaning clearly, the verse لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, and I urged you to always keep the meaning of this verse firmly embedded in your heart, so you never believe what contradicts the meaning of this verse. So if somebody then tells you that Allah has fingers, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, you know that this for sure is not true. And if they tell you, but the Prophet, he mentioned such and such hadith, and in this hadith it is mentioned so and so, you tell him the Prophet ﷺ does not contradict the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ, he is the one who taught us that Allah does not resemble His creation whatsoever. So for sure the Prophet did not attribute fingers to Allah. You tell him you are misinterpreting the hadith of the Prophet. The hadith of the Prophet is not for anybody to interpret on his own who does not have any knowledge whatsoever. No, we go by what the trustworthy, knowledgeable scholars of Ahl Sunnah said. So if you come across a verse or a hadith that you have not learned the interpretation of it, then you say it has a meaning that befits Allah, and you ask. You ask the trustworthy, knowledgeable scholars about the meaning. Don't try on your own to translate and interpret or find on Google. No, because on social media there are plenty of websites. Some might be of trustworthy people and some of people who are looking for something else other than spreading the true belief. So you say it has a proper meaning even though you do not know the meaning of it. So you consult with the trustworthy, knowledgeable scholars. What they said is the interpretation of the verse or of the hadith, but you do not believe whatsoever that that it is saying that Allah is attributed with body parts. Not at all. For sure, and the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salam does not contradict the verses of the Quran. So Allah Ta'ala revealed in the Quran the verse لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, which means nothing resembles Allah whatsoever. Now, because these attributes were mentioned repeatedly, we said that the scholars said knowing them is a personal obligation upon the accountable person. And since we said that Allah Ta'ala, He is eternal, meaning His existence has no beginning, then for sure His attributes are also eternal. They have no beginning and no end. Our attributes are created, are originated. So our attributes have a beginning. And we are created. We have a beginning to our existence. But Allah Ta'ala, His being has no beginning and no end. The existence of Allah has no beginning and no end. And His attributes are also then eternal and everlasting. They have no beginning and no end. So when you know this, then we do not say, when did Allah will? Because when is a question about time, and time is created. And we already said that the will of Allah has no beginning and no end. So we say Allah eternally, meaning without a beginning, willed for things to happen. And they will happen with the time that Allah willed for them to happen, and they will occur according to the will of Allah. Okay, so they will occur according to the will of Allah. For Allah Ta'ala, He specifies things in His creation. So we say that we are sitting now wherever we are because Allah eternally willed for us to be at the place we are in right now. Okay, so Allah Ta'ala eternally willed for things to happen. Inshallah Ta'ala, tomorrow we will start with the meaning of the second testification of faith. I advise you and myself, and I remind myself of that as well, that the intelligent person is the one who protects his tongue, his hand, his foot, his hearing, his eyesight from what Allah Ta'ala forbade. So always remember to use the endowments that Allah Ta'ala granted you with in what is good. Use it in obedience to Allah while you have it. While you have these endowments, use them in obedience to Allah. Do not use them in committing sins. Do not use your hand to hit somebody unjustly, even members of one's own family. does not mean because, this person is my spouse, this person is my child, my sibling, I do with them whatever I want. No, we should abide by the rules of the religion. Okay, we should not use these endowments in committing injustice. And Allah Ta'ala knows best.